later, he'd sold 200. 4 years later, he was up to 600 locations when he was approached by an investment group to sell his company. Recognizing that the magic wasn't just in the kettle or the recipe, the new owners asked Colonel Sanders to stay on as spokesman for the company, which he did until his death in 1980. Today, there are almost 12,000 KFC locations in more than 80 countries with sales of nearly $10 billion a year. Debbie Fields was a 20-year-old housewife who loved to bake cookies. She had no formal education and no business experience, but she had a recipe and an imaginative idea that people would like to buy fresh, hot, soft cookies from a walk-up store. The business people and bankers she approached told her she was crazy, but she and her husband continued to pitch her idea to banker after banker until they finally wore one down enough to give Debbie Fields a loan to open a store in Palo Alto, California. By noon on her first day, she still hadn't sold a cookie, so she went out into the street and gave away samples. That did it. Her walk-in try-a-sample cookie store took off. Today, Mrs. Fields' stores are all across America. Harvard Business School uses her methods as a case study in efficiency, and Debbie Fields has become a best-selling author, an in-demand motivational speaker, and a television personality. Wally Famous Amos was a Los Angeles talent agent who copied a cookie recipe off the back of a bag of Nestle's chocolate chips. He made a few changes to personalize the recipe and started to give out his version of homemade cookies as a sort of calling card. His clients and business associates liked them so much that Wally finally decided to quit show business and open a store. He did it with a Hollywood agent's flair. He opened on Sunset Boulevard with 2,000 invitations, a red carpet, and celebrities. With the same flair, he put his picture on the bag, filled the bags with cookies, and started selling them to exclusive department stores and specialty shops. 10 years later, Famous Amos cookies were a $10 million business. Ray Kroc was over 50 and selling milkshake mixers when he heard about a hamburger stand in California, owned by Dick and Mac McDonald, that was doing great business. He packed his car and headed to San Bernardino to check it out. What he saw was a sit-down restaurant that had a limited menu featuring a good hamburger recipe, and they were serving them faster than any place he'd ever seen. Figuring that if there were more places like this, he could sell them a lot of milkshake mixers, Kroc pitched the McDonald brothers on the idea of opening some more McDonald's. They were interested, but they didn't know who they could get to open the new restaurants. This time, it was a recipe and a magic griddle, but it still needed the extra ingredient, imagination. On the spot, Ray Kroc offered to go into business with them and open the restaurants himself. According to the signs on the golden arches, Ray Kroc's imagination paid off in billions of hamburgers sold. In 1982, Howard Schultz went to work as the director of marketing for a small coffee importer wholesaler called Starbucks, which had only one location in Seattle's Pike Place market. While he was on a trip to Italy, Schultz got the idea that the coffee bar culture he saw in Milan could be transposed to the downtown Seattle scene. He convinced the company to try it. His coffee house idea was such a success that Schultz went out and raised the money to buy the company. 5 years after he joined Starbucks, he was CEO of a company that had 17 locations. 15 years later, Schultz's coffee house culture was on every corner of America, and there were more than 7,000 Starbucks worldwide. As a final example of imagination, we offer Paul Newman's salad dressing. Now, it would seem that it doesn't take much imagination for a big celebrity to put his name on a product, and that's what Newman thought too. But when he and his partner, A.E. Hotchner, pitched their salad dressing idea to companies that specialize in marketing foods, nobody was interested unless they would personally put up about $1 million for the first year's operations. According to Newman and Hotchner's book, Shameless Exploitation, they found out that almost all celebrity products in the food business have been disastrous failures, and now nobody would touch them. So when it came to marketing salad dressing, even Paul Newman's big name wasn't the magic they needed. And unless they were willing to put up a ridiculous amount, money wasn't the magic either. The magic would have to be in the imaginative way that they would convince the right people to help them, and in having the perseverance to stick with it until they succeeded. And just like most everyone with an idea, they were told they were crazy to try it. They were turned down by bottling companies that wouldn't do small runs, and they were rejected by distributors who wouldn't take a chance on another celebrity product. In the end, it was one supermarket owner, Stu Leonard, who helped hook them up with the right suppliers. But even that wouldn't have been enough if Stu Leonard hadn't had enough imagination to see the possibilities and agree to put Newman's own salad dressing on the shelves in his store. 15 years later, Newman's Own Brands was a $100 million company, which gives all profits to charity. This is the end of the editor's comments. What I would do if I had $1 million. The following story proves the truth of that old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. It was told to me by that beloved educator and clergyman Frank W. Gonzalez, who began his preaching career in the Stockyards region of Chicago. While Dr. Gonzalez was going through college, he observed many defects in our educational system, defects that he believed he could correct if he were the head of a college. He made up his mind to organize a new college in which he could carry out his ideas without being handicapped by orthodox methods of education. He needed $1 million to put the project across. Where was he to lay his hands on so large a sum of money? That was the question that absorbed most of this ambitious young preacher's thought, but he couldn't seem to make any progress. Every night, he took that thought to bed with him. He got up with it in the morning. He took it with him everywhere he went. He turned it over and over in his mind until it became a consuming obsession with him. Being a philosopher as well as a preacher, Dr. Gonzalez recognized, as do all who succeed in life, that definiteness of purpose is the starting point from which one must begin. He recognized, too, that definiteness of purpose takes on life and power when backed by a burning desire to translate that purpose into its material equivalent. He knew all these great truths, yet he did not know where or how to lay his hands on $1 million. The normal thing would have been to give up and quit, saying, well, my idea's a good one, but I can't do anything with it because I can't raise the $1 million. That is exactly what the majority of people would have said, but it is not what Dr. Gonzalez said. What he said, and what he did, are so important that I will now introduce him and let him speak for himself. One Saturday afternoon, I sat in my room thinking of ways and means of raising the money to carry out my plans. For nearly 2 years I had been thinking, but I had done nothing but think. The time had come for action. I made up my mind, then and there, that I would get the necessary $1 million within a week. How? I was not concerned about that. The main thing of importance was the decision to get the money within a specified time. I want to tell you that the moment I reached a definite decision to get the money within a specified time, a strange feeling of assurance came over me, such as I had never before experienced. Something inside me seemed to say, "Why didn't you reach that decision a long time ago? The money was waiting for you all the time." I called the newspapers and announced I would preach a sermon the following morning entitled, "What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million." I went to work on the sermon immediately, but I must tell you frankly that the task was not difficult because I had been preparing that sermon for almost 2 years. Long before midnight, I had finished writing the sermon. I went to bed and slept with a feeling of confidence, for I could see myself already in possession of the $1 million. Next morning I arose early, went into the bathroom, read the sermon, then knelt on my knees and asked that my sermon might come to the attention of someone who would supply the needed money. While I was praying, I again had that feeling of assurance that the money would be forthcoming. In my excitement, I walked out without my sermon and did not discover the oversight until I was in my pulpit and about ready to begin delivering it. It was too late to go back for my notes, and what a blessing that I couldn't go back. Instead, my own subconscious mind yielded the material I needed. When I arose to begin my sermon, I closed my eyes and spoke with all my heart and soul of my dreams. I not only talked to my audience, but I fancy I talked also to God. I told what I would do with $1 million if that amount were placed in my hands. I described the plan I had in mind for organizing a great educational institution. where young people would learn to do practical things and at the same time develop their minds. When I had finished and sat down, a man slowly arose from his seat, about 3 rows from the rear, and made his way toward the pulpit. I wondered what he was going to do. He came into the pulpit, extended his hand, and said, "Reverend, I liked your sermon. I believe you can do everything you said you would if you had $1 million. To prove that I believe in you and your sermon, if you will come to my office tomorrow morning, I will give you the $1 million. My name is Philip D. Armour." Young Gonzalez went to Mr. Armour's office, and the $1 million was presented to him. With that money, he founded the Armour Institute of Technology, now known as Illinois Institute of Technology. The $1 million that launched the Armour Institute came as the result of an idea. Behind the idea was a desire that young Gonzalez had been nursing in his mind for almost 2 years. Observe this important fact. He got the money within 36 hours after he reached a definite decision in his own mind to get it and decided upon a definite plan for getting it. There was nothing new or unique about young Gonzalez vaguely thinking about $1 million and weakly hoping for it. Others have had similar thoughts. But there was something very unique and different about the decision he reached on that memorable Saturday, when he put vagueness into the background and definitely said, "I will get that money within a week." The principle through which Dr. Gonzalez got his $1 million is still alive. It is available to you. This universal law is as workable today as it was when the young preacher made use of it so successfully. Editor's comments. The Armour Institute of Technology opened in 1893, offering courses in engineering, chemistry, architecture, and library science, and in 1940 became the Illinois Institute of Technology when the Armour Institute merged with the Lewis Institute, a Chicago college that had opened in 1895 and offered liberal arts as well as science and engineering courses. In 1949, the Institute of Design, founded in 1937, also merged with IIT, followed in 1969 by the Chicago-Kent College of Law and the Stewart School of Business, and in 1986 by the Midwest College of Engineering. Today there are several campuses in downtown Chicago. IIT has been called the alma mater of accomplishments. This is the end of the editor's comment. How to transmute ideas into cash. Asa Candler and Dr. Frank Gonzalez had one characteristic in common.